At 6, charged with murdering a health insurance CEO on the streets of New York. More details are emerging about 26-year-old Luigi Mangione as he appears in court after a 5-day manhunt. The other main story tonight, Israel says it has destroyed Syria's entire navy as the United Nations urges the Israeli military to halt its airstrikes.
Bashar al-Assad. This area used to be full of posters of Bashar and his father because it was a centre of loyalists.
We will hear from Jeremy Bowen as he reports from the capital, Damascus. Police in Northumbria say former England rugby player Tom Voice is thought to have died after his car was swept away in Storm Dara.
Equal pay! Equal pay!
Birmingham's bankrupt city council agrees to pay out hundreds of thousands of pounds to women who were being paid less than men for similar jobs. And a colony of seals kept secret for years off the coast of Suffolk.
On BBC London, we join the dads building better relationships with their children to try to help protect young people from crime here in the capital.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The man accused of killing a healthcare executive in New York last week has appeared in court in Pennsylvania after being arrested by police last night. 26-year-old Luigi Mangione has been charged with the murder of Brian Thompson by New York authorities. He was arrested at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania in possession of a gun. Our correspondent Jessica Parker has been finding out more about the suspect and his arrest.
Under arrest and handcuffed, Luigi Mangione faces several charges, including one for murder in New York City after a health insurance boss was shot and killed last week. But Mr. Mangione was found 280 miles from there in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Along this roadside is a small branch of McDonald's, and it's now become a key focus in this case because it's in there that Luigi Mangione was spotted. An employee then tipped off the police. Investigators are trying to piece together his movements over recent days, and they're talking to people who were inside that McDonald's when the suspect walked in on Monday morning.
A guy came in the door and I didn't really look at him. I thought it was everyone was kidding around. Well, the one guy said, "That looks like the shooter from New York." Well, then we laughed, and I guess he placed his order, and we just went on about our business. But we were kidding about it. They were like, "Well, boy, wouldn't that be something, you know?"
At one point, he even walked past the suspect.
I was just walking back to go to the restroom to leave, and I didn't know. I thought it was one of the workers with their hood up because they do that a lot of times. They'll go back there on break.
This is Luigi Mangione in 2016 as he graduated top of his class from an all-boys private school.
The class of 2016 is truly defined by its inventive, pioneering mentality that accompanies a strong commitment to Gilman tradition.
He'd go on to a prestigious university. The allegations he's now facing have shocked those who know his family.
You wouldn't think someone of privilege or of means from a family that's known for doing so much for the community would do something like this. And obviously, as a criminal defense attorney, I can say he has the presumption of innocence. But that being said, even to be charged for something like this, it's just really surprising.
His most recent address was in Hawaii, where he reportedly suffered from a back injury. Investigators say a document found with him expressed ill will towards corporate America. The shooting has sparked fresh discourse and criticism about the American health insurance industry.
In America, we do not kill people in cold blood to resolve policy differences or express a viewpoint.
Luigi Mangione is now being held here in Pennsylvania and likely faces extradition to New York. Just to bring you some developments, an arrest warrant has been issued by New York authorities. In that document, it's alleged the defendant was found here at the McDonald's with what appeared to be a pistol, silencer and written admissions about the crime. There's going to be an extradition hearing here in Altoona, Pennsylvania in half an hour's time, where we expect to see Luigi Mangione in court once again. The 26-year-old man whose life is now under the microscope as part of this extraordinary case.
Jessica Barker, thank you. Israel says it has completely destroyed Syria's naval fleet. It has been carrying out hundreds of strikes on military targets across the country since the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime at the weekend. Israel says it wants to protect its borders and stop weapons falling into the hands of what it calls extremists. But the United Nations have called for Israel to stop its attacks. In the capital, Damascus, banks and shops are finally reopening. Cars are back on the streets. From there, our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, reports.
At the border, the biggest and potentially deadliest divide in Syria. Coming in from Lebanon, Syrians who fled the war and the Assads, desperate to get home. In the opposite direction, Syrians desperate to get out. Families who fear they'll be singled out for revenge. Some because their religious sect supported the former regime, or because the men carried guns for Bashar al-Assad. Ali read out a Facebook post from a small militia swearing vengeance. So is this such a threat that you want to take your family out to Lebanon? You're worried about your lives?
Yes, sure. The kids, my wife, I'm afraid for them. That's why I'm taking them out to Lebanon.
Violence consumed Iraq and Libya after their dictators. Their fear is the same for Syria. It's not just about the legacy of the war, it's about the legacy of more than half a century of dictatorship. These are people, and there are thousands more coming down the road, who don't feel safe in the new Syria. And going in the opposite direction are all those who just want to get home. The duty-free shop, once a favorite of those the regime had made rich, has been looted and destroyed. Islamist anger at a decadent regime. We drove on to Damascus. The rebels took Syria as Assad's army faded away, but the country's still under fire. To stop Islamist rebels taking over Syria's abandoned military infrastructure across the country, Israel's bombing it to pieces. And not far from this road, taking more Syrian land for what it calls a buffer zone. So far, Damascus is mostly calm, but here someone tried to burn down a mobile phone shop, already looted, from a chain named after Bashar al-Assad's British-born wife. The family earned billions from its control of telecoms as millions of Syrians starved. The firemen have been talking to HDS. He said they're going to cooperate with us. We don't know our destiny, but God willing, it will be good. Next stop was Meza 86, a poor district named after a notorious regime military unit. It was a stronghold of Assad supporters until they bolted the same night Bashar did, as a relieved and happy Safa al-Safadi told me.
When we woke up with the sound of gunfire and smoke, we saw their weapons and their uniforms thrown away in the streets.
Safa said the rebel fighters took the weapons and showed me the uniforms thrown onto the street's rubbish dump and into the dustbin of history, like the dictatorship. Bashar al-Assad. This area used to be full of posters of Bashar and his father because it was a center of loyalists from his own Alawite community. A lot of the guys who lived around here supported their families by carrying guns for the regime. They were in the security, in the mukhabarat, the intelligence, or they were in the military. And now, like him, they've gone. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Damascus.
We're going to be speaking live to Jeremy in a moment, but first our correspondent Yogita Lemay has spent the day in a Damascus suburb called Ghouta, where chemical weapons were used on civilians in 2018. She's been speaking to victims and eyewitnesses of the chemical attack who now want a new investigation.
The horrors that Bashar Assad's regime tried to hide away from the world's view, their full scale is now being revealed bit by bit. This is Ghouta, a suburb of Damascus and a rebel support base, founded by the regime and its allies. And on more than one occasion, chemical weapons were used here. We went to a lane where a chlorine bomb was dropped in 2018, right outside Tawfiq Diam's house. He tells us this is the first time he's been able to speak freely about what happened to his wife and his 4 young children.
Amar, Ali, Muhammad, Judy.
I couldn't speak before this, otherwise the regime would have cut off my tongue. When the attack happened, people started choking and couldn't breathe. My wife and children were killed by chemical bombs, he says. As we talk to Tawfiq, another man, Khalid Nasir, tells us he also lost his family in the same attack, 2 toddlers and his pregnant wife. Anger that he's had to suppress for 6 years, spilling out.
We want fresh investigations. The whole world knows that Bashar Assad is an oppressor and a liar, and that he killed his own people.
For a people who for so long have not been able to talk freely, the minute we came out here, everybody had a story to tell us. And what we've heard here about the chemical attack is just a fraction of the brutality inflicted by the regime of Bashar al-Assad on the people of his own country.
Not far from the site of the attack, Tawfiq and Khalid took us to a mound by the side of a road, where they believe their families are buried in a mass grave. Today is the first time they've set foot here. They weren't allowed in the past. They say the regime wanted to hide evidence. Now they want the grave dug up and a dignified funeral for their families. We also met Abdul Rahman Hijazi, an eyewitness who went to Geneva to testify before the UN. He says he was forced to give the regime's version of events. Intelligence officers detained me and told me to lie about the attack. I was told to say people were killed by dust inhalation, not by chemicals. And if I didn't, my family would not be safe, he told us. Undoubtedly, more such stories will come pouring out of Syria over the coming days. Yogita Lemay, BBC News, Damascus.
Well, let's talk now to our international editor, Jeremy Bowen. And Jeremy, we've heard today the UN asking Israel to stop its airstrikes that it's been carrying out across Syria. What is Israel trying to achieve with them?
Well, it's trying to destroy what is left of the Syrian army. The soldiers, the airmen, the sailors melted away from their military infrastructure, but the Israelis believe that they should destroy it because the Islamists who now control the capital and the country might get hold of it. This is in the spirit of a 100-year-old idea in Israel to erect an iron wall around the Jewish state and then to protect them that way, a military solution, in other words. But the people who came up with that idea believed that then the state had to negotiate with its enemies who would give up trying to destroy it. But the Netanyahu government does not believe negotiation works. They have said they're against a Palestinian state, and by acting in this preemptive military offensive, which the UN is horrified by, in Syria, I think they're showing that they believe that there's no way that they'll be able to have peaceful relations with any kind of future government here in Syria. So it's better to use force while they've got the opportunity, because Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, also believes that since the Hamas attacks a year ago, more than a year ago, last October, that Israel has a chance to reshape the balance of power in the Middle East in its favor. The Americans have been supporting them, and Netanyahu has been congratulating himself today in his court hearing, saying that that is exactly what is happening.
Jeremy Bowen, live from Damascus. Thank you. Police say the former England rugby union player Tom Voice may have died after his car was swept away during Storm Dara on Sunday. It's thought the 43-year-old, who's been missing since the weekend, tried to cross a ford, but his car was caught by the strong current. Well, Fiona Trott is at Northumbria Police Headquarters, and tell us more about what the police have been saying.
Well, all this happened near Alnwick in Northumberland, and the police have told us they've recovered his vehicle, but Tom Voice is yet to be found, and they've told us this. It's believed in his attempts to escape, he's been swept away and tragically died. Now, since Sunday, there has been a massive search, and it's involved specialist teams too. Northumbria Police's Marine Section, the National Police Air Service, drones, dog handlers, volunteers too from the North of Tyne Mountain Rescue Service. And when we were at the scene earlier today, we spoke to members of Tom's family and friends who are also out there looking for him. Now, Northumbria Police say obviously this is a tragic incident and their thoughts are with the family, but of course there'll be so many people around the country whose thoughts are with them. Tom Voice, as you know, was capped 9 times for England. He played for Wasps, Bath and Gloucester before retiring in 2013. Now, police have described this search as challenging. The river flow and high river levels they're battling with at the moment too, following that heavy rain over the weekend, which of course is making it difficult. But while those searches continue, Tom Voice's family are entering a second night waiting for news.
Fiona Trott with the latest there, thank you. The Chancellor has promised to use an iron fist to weed out wasteful government spending. Rachel Reeves says departments will each be asked to identify 5% of efficiency savings as part of a review to set their budgets for the coming years. But she insisted she was not asking for cuts, and departments would be able to keep the money they save. Well, our political editor Chris Mason is at Westminster for us. Efficiency savings, we've heard that before.
We have indeed, yeah, and let's see how they get on in finding them, Sophie. I think what they're trying to do here is move on from that conversation about the budget and those tax rises. Instead, talk about spending, where money is going to be spent, how it's going to be spent between now and the next election. They're going to spend 6 months working that out. They call it a zero-based review. In other words, looking at every pound of spending in every budget. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, she was at a hospital in Maidstone in Kent today to start this ball rolling, insisting, as you were saying, that this isn't about cuts or what some might see as austerity, but there are going to be winners and losers. The Conservatives say it's a noble aim to save money, but then say, hang on a minute, what about that money given to striking public sector workers in pay rises? So how easy or not might it be to find these savings? Well, today the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport published some of its spending, and it's been buying some new folders for ministers to cart bits of paper around in. How much do they cost, do you think? Nearly 600 quid each, and they bought 2 of them. Now, in the spirit of public service, I found myself in the parliamentary gift shop earlier on, and you can get a folder, A4 as well, for 39 quid. It even has a fetching black zip. Here goes then with the line-by-line analysis of spreadsheets throughout this postcode.
Chris Mason in Westminster, thank you. The time is coming up to 6:20. Our top story this evening. Luigi Mangione appears in court after a 5-day manhunt, charged with murdering a health insurance CEO on the streets of New York. And coming up, the King awards the first Elizabeth emblems, recognising public servants who have died in the line of duty.
On BBC London, the illustrious career of a community gardener turned horticultural artist on a Paddington estate. Plus, the growing trend of thriftmas, not buying brand new this Christmas.
In Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu has appeared in court in Tel Aviv on corruption charges, which he called ridiculous. He's become the first serving Israeli Prime Minister to take the witness stand as a criminal defendant in his trial, where he's facing charges for fraud, breach of trust and bribery. From Tel Aviv, John Donnison reports.
A moment of truth to power, at least for Benjamin Netanyahu's critics. He was chipper as he arrived in court today in Tel Aviv, despite being the first ever sitting Israeli Prime Minister to stand trial. He faces corruption charges of fraud, breach of trust and bribery, including accepting $300,000 worth of gifts, including champagne and cigars, and of agreeing to ease press regulation in exchange for favourable media coverage in one of Israel's biggest selling newspapers. Mr. Netanyahu denies it all. Speaking on the eve of his testimony, he said the investigation into him had been born of sin. And today in court, he said the trial was based on an ocean of absurdities. This case, which has been rumbling on for years, has divided Israel. Outside the courthouse today, anti-Bibi protesters faced off with his supporters.
The accusation from the protesters here, some of whom have family members held hostage in Gaza, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has prolonged and escalated the wars in the Middle East for his own political survival, and even to avoid going to jail.
Ofer Calderon is still a hostage in Gaza, and his wife Hadass told me she's angry at her Prime Minister.
He don't care about this 100 and hostage, and he care more to survive in the political way. It's very sad.
Bibi needs to go to jail was the chant. But Mr. Netanyahu is currently riding high in opinion polls. His supporters say at a time of war, he shouldn't be having to face a trial. His testimony alone is expected to take a minimum of 2 weeks. John Donnison, BBC News, Tel Aviv.
Thousands of women are set to have their claims for equal pay settled 4 years after they took action against Birmingham City Council. The dispute relates to claims that women employed in female-dominated roles, such as teaching assistants, have been underpaid compared to those in jobs dominated by men. Birmingham City Council declared itself effectively bankrupt last year, saying an expected bill of £760 million to settle the cases was partly to blame. Phil Mackey is in Birmingham for us. They've been fighting this for years. You've been talking to some of the women. What are they saying?
Well, I think they're quite pleased, but it's been a long time coming, Sophie. A bit of Christmas cheer for the people who work for the council here in Birmingham. But as I say, they've been waiting for ages for this to happen because these equal pay claims have been going on so long. You mentioned the sort of roles that have been underpaid compared to those that have been getting more money than them, even though they're on the same grade, and that's caused a great deal of consternation here. The outstanding bill a year ago, they said, was up to £760 million, but remember, they'd already paid over £1 billion in equal pay settlements before that. So everyone will be happy that this is apparently over for the time being. Among the people I spoke to today was a teaching assistant called Pamela Watley. She said really the council's only got itself to blame for failing to pay them fairly for so long.
It's been especially good for the women of Birmingham to come together the way that they have and fight for what's rightfully ours. But I would say that hopefully those people will also have to put their faith in the council that all the incompetency will stop that's got us to this point, because it's not the workers' faults.
The leader of the council, John Cotton's also been speaking, saying, he'd like to draw a line under this and get on with setting the budget for next year. But remember, as a result, partly because of the equal pay claims bill that the council's had to face, that they are also facing £300 million of savings, or cuts as we also call that. And there have been sell-off of assets as well. And the council tax here has gone up by 21% this year and next. So a lot of people in Birmingham have suffered because of this. It finally appears to have been done. It'll be approved at a council cabinet meeting next week.
Phil Mackey in Birmingham, thank you. High winds are fanning a wildfire in California, which has spread rapidly through the wealthy coastal town of Malibu. Flames were seen close to the library of Pepperdine University, where students were told to shelter. Around 6,000 residents in the area have been ordered to leave their homes. Extra money has been promised by the Welsh Government to tackle record NHS waiting lists as part of its spending plans for next year. The budget was set out before the Senedd this afternoon, But Labour ministers will need to secure the backing of opposition members if it is to pass. Our Wales correspondent Hal Griffith joins us now. Hal.
Yes, Sophie, this was the first Welsh budget in more than a decade where Labour has been in power in both Wales and Westminster. The party then under pressure to deliver on all the promises it made to voters about the two governments working together. That was part of the theme that Mark Drakeford, the Finance Secretary, set out when he announced his plans in the Senedd earlier. He was able to announce spending increases for every department, from transport to education, housing to health. And it is health that will swallow up, well, half of the £26 billion that the Welsh Government has to spend next year. It's also the subject the party knows that voters care about most, the chronic problems of long waiting lists in Wales that keep hitting new records despite all the previous investment. So will this new money really make a difference before the next Senedd election in 2026? Before that, Labour faces another vote. A vote to get these plans through the Senedd. Because it only has half of the 60 seats here, it will need to entice at least one opposing Senedd member to back its plans when it comes to a vote in the new year.
Hal, thank you. King Charles has presented the first Elizabeth emblems, which recognise public servants who have died in the line of duty. Duncan Kennedy was at the inaugural ceremony at Windsor Castle.
They are the public servants who gave their lives for their communities, their colleagues and their country. All now the recipients of Britain's newest honour. Amid Windsor Castle's festive backdrop, King Charles awarded the first Elizabeth Emblem medals to the families of 38 recipients. They include two brothers, Les and Neil Edgar, whose father was a policeman they lost as young children.
Police Constable Edgar makes his last journey.
It was in 1948 that Nathaniel Edgar was shot and killed in London. His is the oldest story to be honoured with the new medal. His sons grateful to the King.
He was very, very pleasant to talk to, very gracious, and we're delighted it was him that presented, of course, as well.
Yeah. And Elizabeth Emblem sounds nice. It's got a nice thing about it, and it's a great honour as well.
Rebecca Lombard Earl received a medal on behalf of her sister. It was in this blaze in Bristol that Fleur Lombard lost her life. She was the first female firefighter to die on duty in peacetime Britain.
The King said to me today, this is national recognition for the sacrifice that your sister made, which is, really special.
The new medals bear a wreath, a crown, and the poignantly simple inscription, "For a life given in service." Organisations like the police and fire brigade already have medals for things like bravery. What the Elizabeth Emblem brings is a recognition of public duty, of service. No greater service was given than by PC's Fiona Bone and Nicola Hughes, two officers killed in 2012. It was their fathers who campaigned for the new medal.
So many people holding onto those emblems, holding onto these certificates, having met the King. There's an immense feeling of pride and relief there. It's finally come together.
The country expresses its gratitude in many ways. Now public servants, dedicated men and women of duty, are getting their recognition. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, in Windsor.
Now have a look at this lot. A secret colony of grey seals full of pups. They're off the Suffolk coast at Orford Ness, and they were kept under wraps for 3 years in the hope that it would help them to thrive. Now, for the first time during pupping season, cameras have been allowed in to film them. Joe Black was there.
We're on a trip to see Suffolk's secret seals. This is believed to be the county's first breeding colony of grey seals after they simply turned up one day during a storm in 2021. Their home is Orford Ness, a former 20th century military testing site, a once top secret and remote location.
Military owned the site from 1913, and they were doing everything from testing early planes as weapons. They were just testing radar here.
It's now run by the National Trust, whose rangers continued the theme of secrecy by keeping quiet about the seals to try and give them a chance to thrive.
And we kept it quiet because we wanted to protect them. We think the seals are here because it is quiet and it's undisturbed. Lots of places around the country has real problems with seals being disturbed by humans, unfortunately, you know, wanting selfies, wanting to get close. Here they are undisturbed, it's remote, and they've thrived for the last 3 years.
This group on the Ness was originally around 200 in number. In the space of 4 years, it's easily doubled, with more pups being born each year.
One day we had no seals on the beach, and then suddenly there were 200. So they stayed and they had pups that first year. So we had 25 pups born, the first time we've ever known pups to be born on Alford Ness. And they came back the following year and brought some friends, and we had some more pups, so 66. And then last year we had 133 pups born on site.
There are bigger colonies elsewhere in the UK, but any new group, especially with successful pupping numbers, is for many a good conservation story. Jo Black, BBC News at Alford Ness.
Time for a look at the weather now. Simon King is here with the latest. Hello.
Hi, Sophie. Yes, we had a lovely end to the day today in Cumbria, where there was a bit of sunshine earlier on. Not so, though, in Glasgow. Been stuck under freezing fog, where temperatures for most of the day have been at -1 degree Celsius. And it's still very cold across Scotland. In fact, temperatures right now, -8 degrees in parts of rural Scotland, -2 Celsius in Glasgow. Meanwhile, in Shetland, that's been the warmest place in the UK today, temperatures of 9 Celsius. But for many of us, with grey skies, 3 to 6 degrees at the moment. But the fog across central Scotland is going to continue through tonight. It'll just thicken, perhaps expand a little bit. Elsewhere across Scotland, into Northern Ireland, perhaps there might be some clear skies, but otherwise, really, again, very cloudy overnight. And that will act like a blanket. It will keep temperatures at about 3 to 6 degrees, so not much change from where they are now. But across Scotland, we'll see those temperatures once again widely below freezing. On into Wednesday, it'll be a case really of spotting the difference. This area of high pressure sticks with us throughout Wednesday, and that's what's going to keep the cloud really for most parts. There may be a few breaks in the cloud across Wales, the Midlands, eastern England, clutching at straws really. Best of sunshine would be across Scotland, except in central Scotland, where once again that fog will be stubborn, and once again those temperatures will struggle beneath that fog. Maybe 0 Celsius again in Glasgow. Elsewhere, about 6 to 9 degrees Celsius. Now, as we go through the rest of the week, that area of high pressure does move away to the east. There'll be some changes, therefore, one weather front moving southward before high pressure moves back in again. But it means that there will be some subtle changes, so a bit more in the way of sunshine as we go into the weekend, and temperatures will start to rise a bit as well. So by Sunday, 11 or 12 degrees Celsius.
Simon, thank you very much. And that's it from us on the BBC News at 6. Right now, it is time for the news where you are. Goodbye.